All right, so we're going to get started. I don't know where everybody is, but it is what it is. People will trickle in. It is supposed to be full, so I was expecting more seats to be filled. But for those people that want in, that's a good thing, I guess. So this is Digital Tools for Architects, Archi 136, the spring of 2020. There's a lot of familiar faces in here, which tends to be the case with 136. So that's a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. You guys get stuck with me one more semester. But it's a lot of the same setup. So I apologize for you guys because that have already taken a class with me, or heaven forbid you were in my class this morning, you're going to hear the same stuff over again. But it's the way it is. So you can listen to me again. I will probably contrast a bit more with 135 as I go through this lecture today, just so you know what's different and what's changed a little bit about this class versus the 135. But for those of you that are taking 136 first, and this is your first class with me, this is all new information. So my name is Grant Adams. I'm an associate professor of architecture here at DVC. That just means that I'm a part-time person here, and I'm here on Mondays and Wednesdays, but not any of the other days during the week. So you'll only find me on Monday, Wednesday. My email, gadams@dvc.edu. You're more than welcome. That's my school-sponsored email. I also have grant@digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. You can send me an email to either one. Actually, if you sent me an email to the DVC, it'll get forwarded to the Digital Tools for Architects, and you'll probably get a reply from that email. Anyway, phone number is right there. You can text me if you get stuck on something or whatever. You can also text me if you're not going to be here for a day. That's fine. If I reserve the right not to answer it or not to respond to you. So if it's 3 in the morning, I'm not going to wake up and respond to you. But I try to be responsive if I can. Office hours. I have one office hour before my morning class. That's usually on Monday, though I'm here Monday and Wednesday that early, so it doesn't really matter. I'm here anyway. 6:55 to 7:55, that's probably early for a lot of you. Congratulations, you moved into 136. You don't have to wake up so darn early anymore. That's a good thing. But that one's there for those people. But if you want to come to it, you're more than welcome to. Or if you want to come use the lab, that's okay as well. Wednesdays from 2:15 to 3:15, which is essentially right after this class, I'm going to try to have the office hour on Wednesday, though I'm typically here on Monday too. Sometimes I'll flip-flop. Sometimes I have a conference call that I have to make or whatever. If it's the case, basically, if I'm here, come talk to me. So even if this is my official office hour, if I'm around, I'm happy to talk. Those of you guys that have been with me before, you know that I love to talk. So such is life. Please use the office hours. That's what they're there for. I'd love to talk about whatever, help you out as best I can, etc. A little bit of background about me, just so you know where I come from, what I've done. I have a bachelor's degree. It's a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture from UC Berkeley. I graduated in 2004 from that. It's starting to be ancient history now. It's a 4-year unaccredited architecture degree. So it's a little bit different than, say, a Cal Poly degree. I coupled that with a Master of Architecture degree, an MArch, again from UC Berkeley in 2007. It's a little bit rare to do them both from the same school, but it kind of worked out in my circumstances such that I did that. I did take a year off in between. If you add up the timing, essentially that's a 4+2 plan. So in order to be a licensed architect, you have to end up with an accredited degree. So I have an unaccredited undergraduate degree that then led into a 2-year master's program. When I was done with my 2 years master's program, I was then eligible to become a licensed architect. I didn't choose to do that, but it's there as kind of what my trajectory was. The alternative to that would be a 5-year degree. That's a Bachelor of Architecture degree. That's what Cal Poly offers. And sometimes, not always, but frequently, somebody at Cal Poly would do a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree and then go on and do a 1-year master's degree. So it ends up being 6 years no matter how you slice it when you're done with your master's. So it's just subtle differences in the degrees and how they're set up. This is not my main job. I work outside of this. Actually, that's my main job. This is like my hobby. I'm a designer. I do a lot of design work. I'm a property manager. I manage a bunch of apartment units and houses. And I also have a general contractor's license. I have a Class B license. Some of you came to my site last fall. It's not quite done yet. I tried really hard over break to be done. I got like 2 weeks left. We're trying to deal with all the inspections at the very end. So anyway, such is life. It's close, which is good. That means I have more time for you when that's done. But that's what I spend all of my time on. Website for this class is the same as it is for 135. It's digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. It has lots of stuff available for you on it. This is all designed to help you out. This is something that you'll use to view all the handouts, all the paper handouts that I give you. So you'll see your exercises, you'll see your assignments, any other important course information, the syllabus. It's all available on the course website. You can download it and print it if you want, or of course you can just look at it there. The course calendar will be there as well. You can subscribe to it just like you did for 135 if you took my 135 class, so you can see what we're doing and what's going on in the calendar. It's not ready yet. It'll be ready by next class. I just haven't gotten to it yet. So that'll be there for you as well. You will post all of your exercises and assignments to the course website. For those of you that took my 135 before, you're now in the 200 series, so everything's going to be, exercise 201, 202, 203, etc. The tutorials are all there, written up, helpful hints, etc. The videos, the lectures are all there. You will also comment on other students' work. The commenting is not quite as extensive as 135 because in the beginning you have to learn how to use Rhino in the first place. So when we're all making the same shape, it doesn't do a whole lot of good to write a comment on the same shape that everybody else made. So I don't make you do things. I'm not here to waste your time. I actually want it to be productive. We'll talk a little bit more about comments later on. Course schedule is technically 11:10 to 12:10 is my lecture time, though that's going to vary rather a lot because sometimes what I'm demoing will be short, sometimes what I'm demoing will be long. It's just going to vary. The balance of the time, 12:10 to 2:15 is the lab portion of the class. That's where you're going to be working and learning to use Rhino and V-Ray, and we'll spend our time there wisely. I already talked about my office hours a little bit. Now I want to point out something that's important. Notice that the time for this class is 11:10 to basically 2 or 2:15. What major thing happens between that time frame? Lunch. So this class excludes your ability to have lunch. So you all have to starve to death. No, I'm kidding. No, so I recognize, of course, everybody needs to eat a little bit. You need to figure it out, especially if you were in my morning class and then you went back to back into this class. It's a long haul. I get it. So if you need to step out and have some food, great. Go for it. Do it. I'm not worried if you do. Take that time, but try not to do it while I'm talking or while I'm lecturing. It's not going to benefit you if you do that. So wait until I'm done, both with the lecture portion and or any demos that I'm doing. So like today, for example, we'll take our break in between the lecture slides and when I do the demo because you're going to do a lot of follow along today. Sometimes I'll do the demo first and then you'll be able to take your break afterwards. It just kind of depends. But try to do it in a time where I'm not actively talking or trying to teach you something. Step out and go ahead and use that. Course description. Essentially this means we're going to learn to use Rhino and V-Ray. That's enough, right? We're going to build some actual 3D physical models. Some of you saw those from last semester. We'll do topos. We'll do some 3D prints. So we're going to do some physical modeling as well. But it's really learning about how to model in Rhino and work with Rhino, and then how to do your renderings and get good quality images from V-Ray. So we'll get through all of that. These are student learning outcomes. You can see those later on. We are using in this class, finally, Rhino 6. Which is a good thing. So we have the updated version of Rhino, and we're using V-Ray 3.6. V-Ray 3.6 is dramatically different than V-Ray 1.5, which was the version we had before. Unfortunately, that means some of my tutorials are slightly off. It's all there. It's just organized completely differently. So in some cases, you have to just bear with me. I've tried to go through and make some updates. Not everything's complete, but I'm working through that process. So I'll help you through it when there's differences in what I'm saying or what I say on the handout versus what you actually have to do or where you find something. You were going to do some physical modeling using the laser cutter and the 3D printer. When we do the laser cutter, you're going to have to buy some cardboard. You're probably going to have to buy some glue, or you might already have some glue. So there's a few like physical supplies that you're going to have to buy. I'll tell you what they are. It's not absurdly expensive, just in terms of your planning for your money. 3D printing is essentially the same thing, though you don't have to buy anything. You just go over there and print. It's unclear at this point in the semester whether I'm actually going to make you create the 3D print and go over there and print it. These are examples of the 3D prints from prior semesters. Or whether I'll just have you write the G code as if you were going to go over and I'll grade that. It's a little dependent on how the lab is set up this semester, who's working the machines, how easy it is for you to get access, etc. So I want you all to succeed. I want you to be able to 3D print. It's just a little bit logistically challenging to get the actual prints because these can take a couple hours a piece to print. That's essentially where we come down. Okay, so we have Rhino 6, V-Ray 3.6, and some 3D materials. So I have a book that goes with the course. Unfortunately, I haven't updated the book for the new version of V-Ray, so it doesn't make any sense for you to buy it. If you have it from last semester, that's great. You can still use it. All the Rhino stuff is still relevant. That hasn't changed. It's just the V-Ray section that's out of date. Grading. This is the all-important question. Everybody always wants to know, how am I going to be graded? If you took 135, it's essentially the same thing. Lab exercises are worth 20% of your overall grade. Assignments are going to be worth 40%. Difference here between 135 is there will only be 4 assignments in this class. They're much longer. Part of the reason that there's only 4 assignments is your first assignment won't be due for like a month and a half because you have to get from not knowing any Rhino to actually knowing enough to produce something interesting. So it's going to take a while before we can start the assignments. So you're going to be learning, and then you'll eventually be able to do that. So the assignments end up being about 10% each of your overall grade. So they do matter. Final project is worth 30% of your overall grade. That's the same as it was in 135. We're going to do an actual design project out of it, and you guys will see that when it comes. And your participation is 10% of your overall grade. Just like with 135, those of you that took this, I think you'll agree with me, it's a pretty even, consistent workload. A lot of what you can do in the lab section. You don't have to work outside. There is some cases where you need to work outside. When we get to the final project, you'll have a lot of time in class, but it'll probably take you some time outside of class as well. So I try to keep it nice and even. Great to couple it with a 220, for example. It's not going to overwhelm you if you're doing both at the same time. So let's talk about these in a little bit more depth. It's a reminder for those of you in 135 or who took 135, but for everybody who hasn't gone through a class with me, the lab exercises are worth 20% of your overall grade. They're designed to be completed in class, so it shouldn't take you longer than the lab section. If you didn't quite finish, that's okay. I understand. Just get as far as you can. Post what you have at the end. Sometimes people get wrapped up in, well, it's not quite ready. It's not quite perfect. If that's the case, just post it and give it to me anyway. It doesn't matter if it's not quite ready. They're due at the end of the lab period on the day they're assigned, and it is graded with a pass, not pass grading system. You do it, you get 100%. You don't do it, you get a 0. Just do it, get 100%. It's important that you understand that because it allows you the flexibility to experiment, try something. If it doesn't quite work right, that's okay. You're still learning, and that's the point. So experiment, get creative, and try to do something interesting because you won't be penalized for doing those kinds of things. Assignments are generally larger and may require some work outside of class. Sometimes you have enough time in class to work on them. Sometimes, a good example will be when you get your first assignment. Some of the days we'll do a particular skill. We'll be talking about a particular skill, and then you'll be working on it. You'll do some practice work on it, but then you might be able to apply it to the actual chair. So an example of this is when we get to doing organic shapes like pillows, and you start learning how to model pillows. I'm going to have a couple. This is a type of pillow to make. This is how you make it. We'll go through it. You'll make that kind of pillow. We'll do another kind. We might do that. And then you'll think about, oh, well, for my assignment, I need this kind of a pillow to go on my chair. Therefore, I'll model this kind of pillow specifically for my assignment. So sometimes the lab exercises are built around you having a little bit of time to work on your own design project. It's important that you get to the point where you can start being creative as opposed to just following step-by-steps. Because we need to transition you from learning step by step into how do I make what I want to make. It's a different mindset. So assignments, They're based on your skills used, but also your overall design. What does the final product look like? What do the renderings look like, etc. They're collectively worth 40% of your overall grade. Just like with 135, you can do a regrade on all of these assignments. So if you do it and you don't like it, you could do it again, and I'll regrade it. You are only allowed one for each of the assignments, and it has to be done at the end of the semester. Well, you could do it earlier, but I won't grade it. And the reason that I do that is because if you already have an A at the end of the semester, it makes no difference whether I go back and regrade it or not. You're still going to have an A. So I don't bother regrading it at that point. However, if you have a B or a C or something worse, I will go in and go through the regrades. Now, the regrades are essentially like your first one never existed. So I'm not grading based on progress. I'm not saying, oh, you did better than your last one, therefore your grade goes up. It's not like that. It's as if your first one didn't exist. I grade it fresh as if I never saw anything before. So it's a complete fresh start. That means your grade could go up or it theoretically could go down, though I don't think I've ever seen that happen because generally you're better. Especially if you do, like in the first assignment, if you do end up doing a regrade later on the assignment, you have such better skills in rendering and modeling that it's almost inevitably going to be better. So all regrades occur at the end of the semester. That's when I do those regrades. Course participation. After several, most might be a little strong, at least half the exercises, and after every assignment, you're going to be required to write comments on other students' work. This is really an important part of learning to be a good designer. And it sounds kind of silly, like, well, wait, why do I have to comment on somebody else's work, and why does that affect my ability to be a good designer? The truth is that learning how to effectively communicate about design is really important toward you becoming a better designer. You need to be able to have good conversations with fellow designers and to be able to articulate what it is that's good about something and what it is that's bad about something. So you can have both positive and both negative comments. That's nothing wrong with that. But what we want is constructive comments. I don't want somebody saying, oh, that looks awful. Well, that didn't help, you know. Or, oh, it looks so pretty. Both of those comments didn't help. They're not useful. So I want you to write comments that actually help somebody. You know, I think the overall composition of your rendering could be improved if you shifted to the left. You know, maybe you should consider adding more columns because the structure looks like it's going to fall over. I don't know. Something like that is a constructive comment. It's trying to help them become a better designer, and it helps you articulate what's good or what's bad. So we're really looking for those constructive. That's worth half of your overall participation grade. So it ends up being 5% of your overall grade. I will help you through it. We'll do a comment together next class, and then we won't do comments for like a month or a month and a half. So it'll be a while, and then I'll remind you when it's time to start commenting again. Materials. So you must have a flash drive for this class. If you've never taken a class in one of the ET computer labs, it's important for you to know that if the computer restarts, or even if the power goes out and it force restarts on you, anything that's saved on the computer itself will get wiped away. So you don't get to keep anything on the computers. You have to have it on your own flash drive. I would highly recommend syncing it to OneDrive. For those of you in 135, I will go through it, or you should remember from last semester how to do that. If you don't, I'm happy to help you, though it's outside of the purview of this class. I would encourage you to do that. So you're making sure you back up your work and you have that backup for you. I would say minimum of a 32 gig drive for this class. If you have other classwork that's going to be on the same drive, give yourself more space because you're going to need it. The thing about this class is sometimes Rhino files get really big, sometimes V-Ray materials libraries get really big, so just give yourself plenty of extra space. Flash drives are cheap, no reason not to do it. Frequently people have moved to hard drives, using little portable hard drives. That's totally fine with me as well. The other thing that I will caution you about these computers, and some of you have experienced this before, the flash drive where you plug it in is exactly at knee height. And if you turn and talk to your neighbor, you have a likelihood of snapping your flash drive off in its place. So that could be problematic for you. I've had it happen at least 3 times in my teaching in this lab. So it does happen. There's a nifty little solution. It costs about $8 on Amazon. It's a little USB extension cable. It's just a USB to USB male to female. If you plug your flash drive into this and then plug this into the computer, you're safe. You're not going to snap your flash drive. So it's an $8 investment, probably worth your time or worth your money to get it. So that's there. If you have an external hard drive, it's got a cable anyway, so you're not going to snap off your hard drive, so you're probably pretty good. Most of this goes out without saying, but in this class I don't give the doom and gloom speech that I give in 135 about losing your work and losing your flash drive, but I caution you, don't leave your flash drive in your pocket and stick it through the wash. Don't run it over with your car. Don't leave it behind you when you leave here. All of those kinds of things apply. If you come to me at the end of the semester and you say, oh man, I lost my flash drive, or it went through the wash or whatever, I'm going to say, yeah, bummer. But it's not my problem. It's your job to safeguard that work, right? So back up your work. Make sure you safeguard your flash drive and you care about it. Best thing to do is to have a backup. If you have a OneDrive backup and you trash your flash drive, it's not the end of the world and makes life a little bit better. So it's your responsibility. Make sure you do it so that you don't come to me with those kinds of stories. Okay. Like I said, you'll need a few physical modeling supplies. It's not going to be too expensive, maybe 20 bucks at most by the end of the semester. So I'm not overly worried about the cost for you guys, etc. Attendance. So attendance in this class is mandatory. You have to be here to learn. It's really important that you're here because you're going to have problems. You're going to have things where you get stuck, it's not working right, and you don't understand why the envelope to store it isn't working, or the cage edit isn't working, or V-Ray, I can't get my materials to load. All of those problems are things that I can help you solve if you're here. If you're not here, I can't help you solve them. So you really need to be here. You need to be in your assigned seats. We'll do the assigned seats next class. So when you come in next class, sit where you want to sit. If you're really paranoid about getting the right seat, come early. Sit there. We'll pass around the attendance sheet. That'll be where your assigned seat is for the rest of the semester. It makes my taking roll really easy and fast because I can quickly look up and see who's here and who's not here. Much easier than finding you all individually. You can't leave class early. So if you're just, oh man, I really get Rhino, I'm breezing through this, that's great, congratulations to you. You finish an hour early from lab, guess what? You just won an extra hour that you can work on your 220 project with, or your 121 project, or whatever class you're in. So use your time wisely. Even better, you can have me help you on one of those projects. That's a good thing too. So use your time wisely. Being here counts for half of your participation grade. You can't participate if you're not here. So all you have to do is be here for that. If you miss 2 weeks of class or more in a semester, it's a 16-week semester. You miss 2 weeks, that's not a good sign. You're probably going to be so far behind you're not going to catch up. So just don't miss that, that kind of class. I reserve the right to drop you, though I don't really like dropping people. I'd rather have you exit yourself. I think it's kind of important. If you're going to be absent from class or you know you're going to be gone, I ask that you email me or you text me saying I'm going to be gone. You don't even have to tell me why you're going to be gone. You just need to tell me you're going to be gone. So it's really important that you do that, get in the habit of doing it. I think a good example of this is if, let's say that I had the flu, and this actually happened one spring semester. It was 2 years ago. I came down with the flu, the legit real flu, and I was in bed, thought I was going to die kind of thing. It wasn't the coronavirus, but it was just the regular flu. And it would be really rude if I just had the police services come and slap a note on the door and you all showed up, this is my opinion, of course, and you all showed up and read the note on the door and said, oh, class is canceled. Right? I think that's really rude. So what I did in that case is I managed to get on my phone in bed, and I sent everybody an email saying, I have the flu. I'm not going to be in class tomorrow. You don't need to come. Because that's a lot better for you than to show up here and have a note on the door. So I expect the same courtesy. If I'm going to be gone, I'll tell you in advance. If you're going to be gone, you tell me in advance. Same thing applies with a job. Let's say you're working at Apple or Starbucks or wherever it is that you guys work, and you decide just not to show up one day, and you don't tell anybody that you're not going to show up one day, you're not going to keep that job for very long. So it's just kind of a courtesy professionalism thing that I expect from you. So an email or a text is great. All that being said, I will also tell you right now in advance, I know I'm going to be gone the last week of February. So I won't be here. There will be a sub. I have no idea who it's going to be. Class will go on as class goes on. You may, depending on who it is and who's teaching, they may or may not know Rhino. They may or may not know V-Ray. You may end up watching my online lectures and then doing the exercises. And when I get back, I'll help you through whatever you miss. It is what it is. I think it's the first time in 12 years I'm missing a week of class. So I apologize, but I know in advance. So guess what? I'm telling you in advance. No, I'm not going to send you all an email saying, well, actually, I probably will before I go, reminding you of all the stuff you need to do. Anyway, so it's there. Assignments are going to be due on the day that they're assigned to be due. They're due before I start talking on whatever that day is. So if I start talking at 11:15, you better have it turned in before 11:15 on that day. If you turn it in at 11:20, it's late and subject to the late work penalty. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So it's really important that you get things in on time. Exercises are due at the end of class. I'm not so much a stickler with the exercises as long as you end up doing it. It is also very likely that at least you will at least miss 1 or 2 exercises over the course of the semester because you just forgot to post them. You got wrapped up at the end of class, you had to run out to your next class, you got distracted, and you didn't post it. No big deal. I'm not going to assign some late penalty for that. The assignments I care about, the exercise not so much. Just make sure you post them at the end. Remember, it's a pass, not pass thing for the exercises anyway. So I'm here. I want to help you. I want to get you to learn Rhino. You're going to have lots of questions when you're learning Rhino. How do I do this? What's the best way to do that? Especially when you get to designing your own things. I want to help you out as best I can. But there's one of me and 32 of you. Well, there's a few less today. There's supposed to be 32 of you. It takes me time to get to every one of you. It takes me time to demo what it is that your question is. So I'll do my very best. But if you're stuck, don't just sit there, falling asleep with your hand up. Well, maybe you want to fall asleep with your hand up, but it's not a good use of your time. Ask your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey, how do you do this? I'm not understanding how the fillet command works. Can you help me out? How do I do project again? What's wrong? It won't project correctly. Those kinds of things. Ask your neighbor, see if they can help you get unstuck. If they can get you unstuck, that's great. You got to move on. You got to keep working. You're not wasting so much time. So I will do my best to get to all of you as easily as I can. But if you're stuck, try to use the resources to get yourself unstuck because I can only get to everybody as fast as I can. The other thing that's important to point out, especially in this class, is that if I've helped you already, I'm going to help the other people before I come back and help you again. Does that kind of make sense? So I try to make sure everybody gets an opportunity with me. So I've had students in the past, specifically in this class, where they'll do one thing, then they'll raise their hand and wait for me to come back and help them do the next thing. And then they'll raise their hand and wait for me to come back and do the next thing. It's not a good use of your time. You need to do some of your work independently. Use the resources, use the lectures, all that sort of thing that I have for you. And I will try to get to everybody and then come back and help that person again. So like I said, I do my best. Everything's done under Creative Commons license. That shouldn't be an issue for anybody, but if you have issues, talk to me about it after class. Late work policy. So let's say we had an assignment that was due on Wednesday. It would be due on Wednesday before I start talking, which is probably about 11:15 or so. If you hadn't turned it in, you turn it in at 11:20, it would be marked down by 10%. So if you had an A, it was now a B. If you have until the following class, so if I didn't turn it in time for class on Wednesday, before I started talking on Wednesday, and I turned it in before I started talking next Monday, it would be graded down by 10%. If I miss that deadline, it's graded down by 20%. So it's basically 10% per day that it's late. The other thing that I should mention, and that I forgot to mention in 135, is the late penalty sticks. So if you do a regrade and you got docked 20% because it was late, you still get docked 20% because it was late. So you can't undo the late penalty. So I'll tell you right now the secret. The secret is turn your work in on time and regrade it. Don't have it be late. Late's really punitive, so it's not worth it. Okay? If it's more than 4 class days old, you can do the math. I just cap it at 50%. I don't go down into the 20% or whatever. If you turn it in and it's complete, you'll get 50%, which is better than a 0. All right, I think I pretty much have covered all the tech stuff. So the rest of this, I just have some student work, some examples of work that people have done. Some of these you guys have seen before because they're on the website. I'll just flip through them. A lot of these are from the final project at the end of the semester. All right, so we'll take a quick break. Not too bad on time. Let's come back at 12:10. Gives you 16 minutes to take a break, get some coffee or whatever. Today, we're going to do exercise 201, which the first part is just getting registered for the course website, making sure you can make your post, etc. We'll do that. Most of you are already registered. If you are not already registered, you should have gotten an email from me, unless you're not in the class officially. We'll take care of you too. You should have gotten an email with your account, so you can set that up. I will help you on the post today. In this class, we're really lucky because if you haven't taken a class with me, you haven't worked on the website, if you turn to one of your neighbors, chances are they did take 135 already, and they already know the website, and they're already really comfortable with it. So they can help you with it if necessary. But we will actually make something in Rhino today. So we'll spend a little bit of time. I will demo something. It's pretty entertaining. The shape that we're going to make is going to take you 45 minutes to an hour to make today, probably. That's kind of the average. We'll go through it together. At the end of the semester, I've always been tempted to throw it at you to see how fast you could do it. I would say it's probably about 30 seconds. So we're gonna get you a lot better as we go forward. So anyway, we're going to make this little shape today, and I'll walk you through that. Please make sure before you take your break that you've signed in this sheet. If you walked in late and didn't sign in on this, make sure that you sign in on this so that I know that you're here and I can figure out why there's so many empty seats for today. Okay? So we'll come back at 12:10 and we'll start with the actual Rhino demo and walk through. Okay? All right, so we're going to get started with our exercise 201. And so under part 1, I need to make sure that you actually have an account on the course website so that you can make your post, etc. A large number of you already have that. So if you did it in 135 in a previous semester or this morning, that's fine. You use the same account. I'm not worried about it. You guys will be able to log in without a problem. For those of you that have never taken a class with me, you should have gotten an email probably yesterday with an account information and a temporary password, so check your email. It was sent to whatever the email that you have on file with the school. Most of you, it's the insight.4cd.edu email. Some of you have converted that over to your personal email. That's where the account was. When you go to log in, you'll use your username, which is, if I created the account for you, it's your first letter of your first name, period, and then your last name, without the numbers, the Insight numbers and whatever. So I took that from your Insight login. Your password is a random string of characters that they sent you in an email. If you've lost it or don't remember what your password is or whatever, you can click on the Lost Your Password. You guys have all worked through these websites before. You know they send you an email with the new password, etc. Sometimes it goes to the spam folder. I've had that happen in Gmail frequently. Go find it in your spam folder if you're not seeing it. So you'll need to actually log in to get the next file. So I'm going to encourage you all to log in now. While you're logging in, I will walk through the website a little bit just so you can see what's on the website and know where some of the content is. Under the About tab, which is our first tab here, we have, you guys are always going to be looking for the 136 Digital Tools for Architects. I have a link to the syllabus. This is the paper This is essentially what I gave you at the beginning of class. It'll have all of the course syllabus information on it, etc. If you scroll all the way to the very bottom, there's a link to the PDF, so you could download it and print it again if you wanted it for some reason. You could also go back in time and download the syllabus from the fall 2013 semester if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but it's there. Such is the case with all the content on the course website anyway. Below that, you can also go to the course calendar. You can subscribe to the calendar feed. For those of you that remember doing that in 135, it's the same process. If you want to do it and you haven't taken 135 with me, that's okay. I'm happy to help you walk through it. So that's all there. The calendar actually doesn't exist just yet because I haven't updated it for this semester. So I will, and I'll get there. I just haven't done it quite yet. Next tab over is the lectures. So for example, if we go down to Digital Tools for Architects 136, if we go to Spring 2020, you'll see there's Lecture 201. If I were to click on Lecture 201, it's going to give you access to the slides from the lecture. So if you wanted to see the slides for some reason, it'll show you the video itself. As soon as I'm done processing the video, it'll show up there. If there's any specific downloads, you can download those there. Etc. So if we went back to, say, last semester here, you could see a lot more of the lectures are here. You could go back. If you were struggling with how to do something, you could watch 201 from the fall, and you'd see essentially the same thing. In rare cases, there's subtle differences. There is a link to the course playlist on YouTube. It's not available just yet, but you'll be able to click on that. So that you can see the whole YouTube playlist, and I'll keep adding to that playlist as you go forward. In some cases, I forget to upload the links to the actual website, and if you go to YouTube, you'll see it before I update the links. But I'm just posting that out for whatever it is. This actually should be, yeah, it should be 201. I was in the wrong class. So you guys are always looking for the 200s. Next one over is the tutorial section. You guys are really only concerned with Rhino and V-Ray for the most part. I've tried to update the V-Ray tutorials, so when you get into some of these, it should have the new V-Ray. It should have all the new V-Ray buttons. If it is that, I have V-Ray version 3.6 Plus showing those screenshots, and then down below, I still have the old V-Ray 1.5. So if you for some reason have V-Ray 1.5 at home or whatever, it's really the difference between the old version of V-Ray and the new version of V-Ray is just how they organized everything. It's all still there, all the same content's there, it's just organized completely differently. So that's the fundamental difference. So anyway, the tutorials are here for you. We will get down into some of the assemblies later on toward the end. We'll talk about plans, sections, elevations, etc. So in that case, we'll be using Rhino, V-Ray, and Illustrator. We'll do a little bit of Illustrator in this class. So you have a slight advantage if you've taken 135. With me before, you'll have some Illustrator experience. If you have not taken 135, don't panic. I will walk you through and hold your hand on anything that's Illustrator centric. So don't worry, don't panic. I'll work you through it when we get there. So those are all the tutorials. Next step over is the exercises. This is where you'll find the exercises. I'm going to come back to this in a little bit because we'll work from there today. Next over would be the assignments. Currently there aren't any assignments, so it's not updated just yet. It will as soon as the first assignment comes out. Beyond that, we have resources. I have V-Ray, I have a materials library, I have lots of content for you guys to use that's available there. Nothing to worry about just yet, but it'll be there eventually when you need it. Next one over is student work. You'll be able to go in and see what people have done. So for example, I could go to 136, I could come here to exercise 201, and this would show you what previous semesters have done. And so you can see their posts. We'll move forward today, your posts will show up here as well. And the last one was the login, which should be self-explanatory. I'm going to go back to exercises here, and I'm going to go to today's exercise. So I'll click on Spring of 2020. I'll click on exercise 201 here. And this brings up exactly what you're seeing as part of this handout. So everything that's on this handout will show up on the course website. The advantage is, of course, that links are live, so you can click on them as opposed to having to type them in, which is nice. So part one, we're getting you set up on the course website. For those of you, there's not too many of you that I haven't seen before in here, so that's good. If you're struggling with getting your account set up or whatever, I'll help you through that, and we'll get you started. Under part two, as part of the career education department here at DVC, this course falls under that jurisdiction. So they ask every semester for you to fill out a survey so that they can correctly fund this class and get the correct allocation of money. If you have not done it yet this semester, I would like you to do it now. You only have to do it once per semester, so that's good. I have no way of knowing if you had a class already this morning and already filled it out, but it is how we get funding for the class. So it actually is really important that you do it. They had a lot of trouble doing it last fall. They did it through the Canvas system, and it didn't work particularly well. So now it's through SurveyMonkey. It's pretty easy. Click a few buttons, and you're done. So there's a link right here. If you wouldn't mind going to that, that would be great before the end of class today. So now when we get down to part 3, this is where we're really going to start. And I will come back to how you post, and I'll walk you through that part. So I didn't talk about the back end of the website just yet, because I want to concentrate on actually doing a little bit of Rhino today, so that you get your feet wet and are starting to understand what Rhino is and what it can do. The first part of part 3 here, it says, please download exercise 201.3dm. This is a Rhino file that I've prepped for you to let you start working on it, and hopefully that'll be a little bit easier than starting from scratch. So I want you to go ahead and click on it and download it. Once it's downloaded, it's not a particularly large file, you can go ahead and click on that file and it will open up in Rhino 6. I hope. And there we go. So it's gone ahead, it's opened up for me. There's a few things that I've already installed that will help with the rendering. I've also dealt with background and lighting and that sort of thing. So there's a few things that I tweaked just to be ready for you. But we're going to actually start to build something in Rhino. Before we build, though, I want to walk through what's going on in our window here, what the tools mean, etc. So we'll spend a little bit of time just talking through what's going on in Rhino. So Rhino is shockingly similar to AutoCAD. So how many people have worked in AutoCAD before? Okay. Well, guess what? Since you've worked in AutoCAD, you're already a step ahead when it comes to Rhino. If you've never worked in AutoCAD, no big deal. It just means you'll learn Rhino, and then you'll be a step ahead when you go to learn AutoCAD. So I always refer to it as what AutoCAD really should be in 3 dimensions. So AutoCAD 3D is awful. It always has been and always will be. Rhino is really a great version of AutoCAD in 3D. So it's pretty natural to pick up. It has an incredible amount of flexibility in terms of what you can build. Some people have experience in Revit, and they ask what the difference is between Revit and Rhino. Rhino is far more about the flexibility of design that you just don't have in Revit. You could build absolutely anything in Rhino. And in Revit, there's certain constraints for what you're building within. So I think it's really good for that, and we're going to try to use it to its full extent. So when we look at our basic setup here, we have our typical menu structure. All the commands are available through the menu structure. It does tend to take time to go up to curve, for example, and then go to polyline and then choose polyline. So it's a little bit slow in its process, but all the commands are available through the traditional menu structure. Directly below the menu structure, we have a command line. It's kind of like AutoCAD, except that the AutoCAD command line is down at the bottom. So it's a little bit of getting used to. When I first started working in Rhino before I taught it, I always moved my command line down to the bottom because that's where I was used to seeing it. But I don't do that anymore because this is the standard setup. So you guys are all seeing it standard. I don't make any custom modifications. So what you see is exactly what I'm teaching as well. So there's a command line. The command line gives you really good prompts for as you're doing stuff. You want to keep an eye on it because it's going to ask you questions or ask for options. And so it's something you want to get used to looking at. It also is a great way of interacting with the program because instead of going, for example, to curve, polyline, and then polyline, you can actually just type directly into the command line. And as you start to type polyline, it will fill with all the content that is relevant as you start to go. So the default here was polygon, but as soon as I get to poly and then L, I'm suddenly in polyline. So you don't even have to type all of the full command. As you start to do it, it'll auto-populate and let you pick it. So that's helpful. Directly below that is a set of V-Ray tools. we'll cover all of these V-Ray tools going forward, and I'll talk through that, but that is the V-Ray toolbar. Below that, Rhino has these little panels that you can click on. We're going to work almost exclusively in the standard panel. Very rarely will we shift to any of the other panels, though they are there should you want to go to any of those. They're kind of like little tabs that give you different tool sets. There's our standard set of tools. Below that is another set of V-Ray tools. Why they're redundant, I have no idea, but we get both. So you get a second set of V-Ray tools. On the left side here is your standard toolbar. You should see that. These contain the most commonly used tools. So in addition to being able to initiate a command from the menu structure and from the command line, there are also buttons that you can pick. So there's really 3 ways to start any command in Rhino. And as you get faster at doing it, you're going to move toward the command line. But initially, picking from the tool buttons is a pretty reasonable choice for picking a lot of things. I will point out that in this toolbar, many of the tools have a little arrow in the bottom right corner. That means that there are other tools hidden beneath that first tool. So the one on top, in this example, is the polyline. That's the most common choice. If I click on the little arrow here, I will get all the other types of lines that I could draw. So you can always get into more specifics. This is more common with the surface tool. This tool here is the surface from 3 or 4 corner points. Underneath that is a variety of the other surface tools. So you get used to clicking on that little triangle and then choosing one of the other tools. You can again get to all of these by command line as well. So those are our tools. On the right side over here, I'm skipping the main workspace for right now. On the right side over here, I actually have a tendency to pull this over a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. By default, Rhino has it a little bit smaller. I find it hard to read, especially when you get into layers. So I tend to move it over, make it a little bit bigger. That's a personal preference. It's the one customization that I do. The default here, this kind of color wheel, is our generic properties. I have nothing selected right now, so it's giving me general properties about the viewport, the camera that's being used to see the viewport, etc. As we get to specific objects, there'll be information about that particular object in the properties. It's kind of like the entity info information in SketchUp. Same concept. Next tab over is our layers. There are 2 layers in this scene. There is a layer for scene. That layer is locked, so you can't edit it. That's something that I set up for you in advance. Don't worry about it. You're going to be working on the default layer. We'll spend a lot more time with layers and organization later on in the semester. By default right now, you're just on a generic layer, and that's fine. As you go forward, there are some other tabs that have to do with rendering and materials. We're not going to worry about any of those. The last tab over here is the Help tab. Sometimes this can help give you a little demo about how a particular command works. So if you're a little bit lost, you can always look at that as well. We're going to shift all the way to the bottom of the page here. And this is something that I have to double check that it's set up. Sometimes when they do the computer image, they don't do it correctly. But you should see a series of boxes that start with end, near, point, mid, etc. These little things that are right conveniently behind my head and difficult for you all to see are your object snaps. This allows you to work to a specific object that exists in the page. I would recommend turning on end, mid, and perpendicular by default. So I'm going to check the boxes for end, mid, and perp. I should have those 3 checked. We will get into using some of the other ones, but those are the 3 that I tend to just leave on all the time. Below that, at the very bottom here, we can see information about our drawing, including what the default unit of measurement is. Right there it says inches. That's my default unit. We will be working in inches as our primary unit. Doesn't mean that you can't input feet, but inches is the default unit. It's important to stick with inches because a lot of the materials reference that default unit. And if you change your default unit to be feet and a material has a depth, so to speak, of 2 inches, it'll suddenly be a depth of 2 feet. And so it messes up your materials because it's looking for inches. So we're going to be primarily working in inches as our default unit. Next over here, it's telling me what layer I'm currently on. I'm currently on the default layer. That's fine. And then we have a bunch of little toggles that turn on and turn off. We'll cover this a little bit more in depth starting next class. But the ones that are on are bold. The ones that are off are just not bold. Okay? And so finally we get to the workspace itself that we're working with. We have kind of our traditional orthographic projection. We have top, front, and right side views shown by default. And then we also have a view called perspective. So we're seeing all 4 of those views at once. You can, while you're drawing, interact in any one of the views, and you can also move between views while you're working on a command. So I could, for example, start drawing in the top view, and I could switch over into the perspective view and keep drawing. So I can work between and among all these views without much difficulty. The other thing that we can do is we can choose to make one of the views large and take up all the screen real estate, or we can go back to the 4 views. So if, for example, I want the perspective view to take up the whole screen, I can double click here on the word perspective, and when I do that, it will take up the whole page itself. A couple other things to note as we interact with the scene. Zooming in and zooming out are scroll wheel, so we can zoom in and zoom out, scrolling in, scrolling out. Likewise, orbiting is a right click. So in SketchUp, for those of you that have worked in SketchUp, it's a middle mouse button. You hold that down. In Rhino, it's a right click. I always have trouble in SketchUp because I go to right click when I want to orbit, and it's really middle mouse button. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but that is there as well. Some people get really interested in having the scroll wheel. If you hold down on the scroll wheel, have it pan. Some people really like that. That's a customization. I can show you how to do it, but it's not by default on the screen here. Okay, so there's one other thing that unfortunately is set up and wasn't fixed in this image that we have to do, and you can see it artifacting right here. The black line that represents the edge of this plane is not showing. That's a problem with the computers that they didn't fix from the image. And so we have to manually go in and fix it every time. It's really annoying. But we're going to go to Tools, and we're going to go to Options. So into the Tools menu, and then to the Option. And then under View, it's the very last one in this list. I'm going to expand it. And one of the things that I can see is something called OpenGL. I'll click on OpenGL, and I'm going to uncheck this GPU tessellation option. As soon as I do that and say OK, that front edge will show back up. It's just a quirk. And unfortunately, they have not managed to fix it, even though it's been over a semester. So, such is life. We're stuck with that. You will find if you don't do that, that lines that you're drawing will just be missing, and you don't understand why they're missing. But it has to do with just what's displayed. The line actually does exist. OK, so from here on out, we've talked through what's going on. We're going to follow Rhino 5.2, which is a tutorial. I can get to it by going to the course website here and going up to Tutorials, coming down to Rhino, and then 5.2, Simple Shapes. There it is. This also matches up with the little thing on the bottom of your handout. So you don't have to do it the online way. You can do it here on your handout as well. One of the things that's challenging for me as I teach through this is there's always multiple ways of creating this kind of an object. The other thing is sometimes you do it out of order. So as I'm going through, sometimes I end up doing one step before the other. It's just kind of the nature of Rhino modeling. It's not always perfectly scripted. I'm going to do my best to follow along exactly what I say in the tutorial so that it's consistent. The other thing that's going to happen as we go through this is I will do it once. Some of you will get lost. I will go back and I will do it again. Some of you will still be lost. I will go back and I will do it again. So I'm going to do this several times. So if you work your way along and then suddenly you get lost, hang tight. We'll come back and you can pick up again. Like I said, this is going to take you like 45 minutes to do. And then by the end of the semester, it'll take you like 10 seconds to do. It's just part of getting used to it. Some of you will pick up on it faster than others, but don't panic. You'll all be there by the end of the semester, I promise. OK, so what we're doing is we're creating the shape that's on the front of this handout. It's kind of like a cube with a curving side to it. And so we're going to do that using a variety of techniques. I also, when I work through these scripted exercises, it's the case today, but it'll also be the case going forward next class, the next 5 or 6 classes. When I give you a script, frequently what I'm trying to make you do is learn some very specific tools that I think will be beneficial to you later on. So the reason that I write it in a certain way, using a certain set of tools, is because I want you familiar with what those tools mean. So for example, one of the tools that I'll cover today is duplicating an edge. It's a great tool. It's something that you can use frequently. Is it relevant right now? Probably not. But down the road, you'll need to be able to use it. So I'm trying to teach you in advance, oh yeah, there is this. I can always use derivative geometry to get a line or a curve from another shape. So it'll make sense as we go forward. So trust me as we go forward. Okay, so we already have, we can skip over step 1 and step 2 because we already have our template set up. Sorry. Under part 3, we're going to jump over into the perspective view. So I'm going to do that by double-clicking on the word perspective to make it the large view. I'm going to zoom out so that I can see kind of my whole workspace here. And we're going to go ahead and create a rectangle using our rectangle corner-to-corner tool. So over here in our toolbar, I'm going to pick the one that looks kind of like a rectangle. If I hover over it, it'll say rectangle corner-to-corner. That's the tool that I'm going to start with. I'll go ahead and click on it. And we can see in our command line, it'll say first corner of rectangle. And then we can go from there. So we're going to start right at the origin, but instead of trying to pick it, I'm going to actually type in where I want it to start. So I'll type 0, 0. I could add one more 0. I could say 0, 0, 0. The last coordinate, so this is x, y, and z. The last coordinate, the z value, is assumed to be 0 unless I specify otherwise. So I don't really have to type it in. If you get a little bit lost with the coordinates today, don't panic. We're going to spend all class on Wednesday talking about coordinates and how they relate to Rhino. So don't worry about it. If you get a little bit lost, just trust me in the values here. So I'll go ahead and say 0, 0, and then I'll press enter. That means I'm starting right there at the middle of everything. It's going to ask me for other corner or length. So I have some options when it comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the other corner. Because it's a 5 foot by 5 foot rectangle, I can go ahead and type 5 apostrophe. That would be the foot sign. So 5 apostrophe, comma, 5 apostrophe. So that's 5 feet by 5 feet. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and press enter, and it will then create this shape right here. All right, if I, and again, this is where I'm being redundant. If I were to start over here, for example, it's going to allow me to specify a length. So I could just type 5 feet here, and then it's going to ask me the other length, and I could type another 5 feet. And it's going to give me 5 feet by 5 feet. That looked a little bit skewed. It looks longer than it is wide. It's only because I'm looking at it in perspective view. If I were looking at it in the top view, we'd see that they're both 5 feet by 5 feet. So if I didn't start right at the origin there, it's often easier to follow the other method of creation just by typing in length and saying 5 feet and then 5 feet again. So I now have, I'm going to delete these two for right now. I now have my rectangle set up. This is what's going to help me get started for my particular shape here. Okay, I'm going to use the patch tool to create a surface on this particular shape. And I will do that by going up to the menu here and saying surface and then patch. Alternatively, I could type into the command line patch, or I could specify the patch tool from here. And in all honesty, I have no idea where it even is because I never pick it from here. There it is, right there. So I have 3 different ways of initiating the patch command. If I have nothing selected, in that case I already had the rectangle selected, and I start the patch command, first thing it's going to ask me is to select what it is that I want to patch, which in this case would be that rectangle. So it doesn't really matter which the order is. It's just going to prompt me if I don't have a selection. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to bring up the patch surface options dialog box right here. The only thing that we're going to change is the U spans and V spans, and we're going to change those to 2 and 2. It doesn't really matter but it's a little bit cleaner if we go to 2 to 2. It's only a very basic square, so there's not too much that we need to do. We don't need a lot of detail. U and V spans will make a lot more sense later on in the semester. For right now, just trust me, we only need 2. And I'll go ahead and say OK. I've then created this surface. So in Rhino, we create curves, which are essentially lines, and we create surfaces. So I've created my first surface, which is right there. That's a good thing. So from here, I'm going to go on and use the rectangular plane corner to corner tool. So it's not this surface from 3 or 4 corner points. It's going to be underneath that. So I'll click the little triangle next to it, and I'm going to choose the rectangular plane corner to corner, which is this first one right here. There are 2 other options for rectangular planes. There's a 3-point rectangular plane, and there's also a vertical plane. You can access the other 2 through the first one. So if I choose rectangular plane corner to corner, right here it's going to ask me for the first corner of plane, but I can also choose vertical, which is what I'm going to have you do. So I could choose the vertical plane tool by default, or I could initiate the rectangular plane and then choose to make it vertical. I could type whatever the capital letter is. In this case, it was V if I'm working in the command line, or I can click on vertical. Either way will get us there. So now it's asking me for the start of the edge. So the start of the edge is going to be this back edge. I'm going to snap to this point. I already turned on my end snap. So as I hover over that point, it's going to jump to that point. I'll get a little text that says end. That means it's snapping right on the end there. I'll click. Then I will go to the end of the edge, which is on the other end of this point. There it is. And I'll go ahead and snap. It then, up here in the command line, asks me for the height. So in this case, it would be 5 feet again. So I can go ahead and type in 5 feet. Now, it would seem that once you type in 5 feet, you'd be finished. But in Rhino, there are 2 options for this rectangle. It could be going up, as it is right now, or it could be going down, like that. And so depending on which rectangle I want, I'm going to choose to have it go up or go down. And all I'm doing is clicking on the side that I want it to be on. So I want it to go up, so I'll make a single click with my mouse to create that vertical plane. So let's try that same thing again along the back wall here. Again, I can start with my regular rectangular plane and then choose to make it vertical. Or I could come in and jump directly to the vertical plane. Either way. Start of edge, it's going to be right here, so I'll click on that corner. End of edge will be right here. And now I can start to come up. I know that that measurement was 5 feet, but I could also just snap to that existing surface because it's already there at 5 feet. So that would work just as easily. So I'll come up here and I'll snap to that corner, and now I have this surface, I have this surface, and I have this surface. So I'm making those 3 surfaces so far. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a polyline. So I'll come over here to the polyline tool, which is right below the arrow. And I will go from this corner to that corner. Now, in a polyline, we can keep drawing. So I can keep drawing. I only need the line from here to there. So I'll go ahead and press Enter. And that gives me just this line. Once I have that line established, I'm going to use the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, which is just the tool itself right here. So I'm not going underneath it. I'm going to choose 3 or 4 corner points. And all I have to do is pick, in this case, the 3 corners of my surface. So that's corner 1, corner 2, and corner 3. It doesn't matter in which order you pick the corners. So I just went around. I said 1, 2, and 3. It's asking me for a 4th corner, but I don't have a 4th corner. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Enter on the keyboard. And that then creates this surface on top. So one more time, that was my surface from 3 or 4 corner points. picking the 3 corners, 1, 2, 3, pressing enter on the keyboard, and that then gives me that top shape there. Perfect. So the next thing I want is I'm going to create that twisting surface that goes from this edge right here down to that edge right there. I have a line that's already here that I created already, but I don't have that line down here. The only thing I have is a surface or a rectangle that goes all the way around. Oops. That one right there. So I don't have just a single curve along the surface. So this is where something called derivative geometry comes to play. And that is that whenever I have an object, I can get other objects from it. So I already have a surface here. If I want this edge of that surface, if I want a curve that is on that edge, no problem. I can go up to curve, curve from objects, duplicate edge, or I could type in duplicate edge or dupe edge to get to it. And all that's doing is it's saying, okay, which edge do I want to duplicate? I want to duplicate that edge right there. When I press enter, it then creates a line for me. And you guys are like, well, wait a minute, I could just draw a line from one point to the other. That would be fine. True. In this case, you absolutely could. But imagine for a second that instead of having a flat surface, we had something that had some ripples in it. If we wanted that edge, it would be much harder to trace it and much easier to say, just duplicate the edge for me. So we would rely on the duplicate edge if this surface here was more complicated, which of course it isn't right now. So I now have this curve right there, and I have this curve right here. Now I'd like to point something out in the selection process here. And this is something that I think Rhino does particularly well. When I go to click this curve, there are 3 different objects that I could pick from. Rhino by default brings up this selection menu that lets me toggle through what the various objects are to make sure I pick the right one. It would be fantastic if Illustrator or InDesign had this feature, because you try to pick something and you're like, no, they'll only pick the one on top. So in this case, we can pick any one of the objects, and it lets us kind of cycle through it. It highlights them in the pinkish color so that we know which one is which. So in this case, I wanted the first option here, which is this curve right there. When I click on it, it highlights in yellow. I'm going to go up and select this curve here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to add to the selection. If I hadn't held down the Shift key and I had this selected and I went up to try to select this one, it's going to deselect this line. So I need to make sure I hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and select that line as well. So I have this line here and I have that line there, both selected. I'm now going to create a surface that goes between those 2 lines. And I'll do that by using the loft command. So I'll go up to surface and then loft. Alternatively, I could type loft, and I'm sure that there is a tool for it. But like I said, I've never done that. So I don't initiate that command there very frequently. The loft options dialog box comes up. All the default options are just fine. So we're not going to worry about anything here, and we can go ahead and say OK. And so you can now see, sorry, there was me doing SketchUp again. When I rotate around or when I orbit around this particular object, I have this beautiful little curving surface. Now notice in Rhino, there's no triangulation to this surface. Remember in SketchUp, you get all those little facets whenever you try to do a surface. In this case, it's perfectly smooth. So I need to finish off this shape. I need one more surface along this edge. I can do that using the surface from 3 or 4 corner points again. And I'll just pick the corners. 1, 2, 3. I'll press enter when I'm done. And there's my last surface. So this is the shape that we're trying to create. So we're going to get to the rendering in just a second, but I'm going to repeat the whole thing as I said, so that if you got a little bit lost, you can do it. If you didn't get lost and you were able to make it again. So this is, again, it's all about skill building. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of class today, maybe you had 3 or 4 of these, and that's perfectly okay. So we'll continue on. So I'm going to use that rectangle corner to corner tool, just like I did the first round. This time I'm not at the origin, so I'm not going to type 0, 0. I'll just click some space. We'll do it there. And I'm going to use my length option. So I'll type 5 feet for the first length, and then 5 feet for the second length. There it is. I can then do a patch command. So that was under surface and then patch. And I'll say OK. Alternatively, I could do a rectangular plane, corner to corner. And I could create my surface that way. Alternative to that, I could do a surface from 3 or 4 corner points and pick 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's lots of different ways of creating this same object. So just because I script it one way doesn't necessarily mean that's how you have to do it. So there we are. I have that first shape. The next one that I'm going to do is to create the vertical plane behind. So I did that using either the vertical plane tool, this one, or by picking the rectangular plane corner to corner and then specifying vertical as the option. I'll then start of edge right here, end of edge right there, and now I need to know the distance. In this case it would be 5 feet. And I need to know the direction. I want it facing up, so I'll click one more time on the upward side. And that gives me that back wall, so to speak. Next thing I need to do is continue. I'll use the same command here. I'll use my vertical plane. So I'll come in here and choose vertical plane. I'll snap to this corner, and I'll snap to that corner right there. And then my vertical plane is going to go up to meet the one on the other side. There we go. So now I have this and this. The next piece was to draw a line diagonally from this corner to this corner. So I'll go back up to my polyline tool. I'll click on the first corner. I'll snap over to the second corner, and then I'll press Enter on the keyboard. All right, so we'll fill in this top piece. I'm going to use a surface from 3 or 4 corner points, the default tool right here. There it is. And I will pick 1, 2, and 3. Then I'll go ahead and press Enter, and that gives me that surface. Next piece was to do the swooping side. Actually, I'll do it this way just so that they're mirrors of each other for the fun of it. So I'm going to use that derivative geometry. I'm going to go to curve from objects, duplicate edge. And I'm going to choose that edge right there to create a line. Go ahead and press Enter on the keyboard. There's my line. I'll hold down Shift, and I'll select that line right there. So now I have these 2 lines selected. And now it's just going up to Surface and then choosing Loft. And when I do surface and loft, the loft options are all just fine. We'll go ahead and say OK. And that gives me that twisting surface. The last piece would be to fill in that triangle on the side. I'll use my surface from 3 or 4 corner points. 1, 2, 3, and one more return. And there it is. So one more time. Do it one more time. Rectangular plane corner to corner. First length is 5 feet. Second length is 5 feet. I need to select it and choose to patch it. This time I'll type in patch. 2 by 2 is fine. I'll say OK. There's my surface. Next thing would be my vertical planes. I'll click the little triangle. We'll choose vertical plane, corner to corner. That's my line. And then my height would be 5 feet going up. I'll repeat the last command. Vertical plane, corner, corner, height. Next part would be to draw a polyline from this corner to that corner. I'll press Enter to finish the polyline. Then I'll do a surface from 3 or 4 corner points. Go 1, 2, 3. I'll press enter to finish, and that gives me that. Last piece would be to do the twist. I already have this line. Oops. I already have that line. I need a line down here. This is where the duplicate edge comes into play again. I'm going to go to curve, curve from objects, duplicate edge. I have that edge selected. I'll press enter. Then I'll hold down shift and select that edge right there. So I have this line and I have this line. I can then loft those two lines together. So I'll go up to surface and then loft, and that creates those two. I'll say OK, default options are just fine. And the last piece is to fill in this triangle. So again, surface from 3 or 4 corner points right there. And we'll do 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll go ahead and press enter to finish. So you can see that each time I did it, I sped up just a little bit of doing it. And likewise, by the end of the semester, you guys will be able to do this really, really fast. OK, so now it's time to create some final product that we're going to post on the course website. So this is where we get a little bit of an introduction to V-Ray. I can't help but throw a little bit of V-Ray in there. And that's part of why I set up the file ahead of time so that it'd be ready for you guys. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the V-Ray Asset Manager. It's the sphere-looking thing with a V on it. It doesn't matter whether you pick the upper one or the lower one. And when I click on that, it opens this V-Ray Asset Editor. And the V-Ray Asset Editor has so much in it. It's very dense, and there's lots of options. But we're going to stick to some of the basics. I currently have some materials already loaded for you to play around with. I have gold. I have a plastic red. So when I click on these various materials, you can see that it shows me a preview of what it looks like. So I have gold. I have plastic red. I have an orange porcelain. I have a shiny blue. And I have a titanium. So with any one of these materials, I can assign it to all of the objects, one of the objects. It's really up to me. I'm going to use gold for right now as my material. And to assign it to all of the objects, I can actually just assign it to the layer that all the objects are on. So in this case, I would just right-click on the name of the material. And I would say apply to layer. And it's going to be default. That's the default layer. So apply to layer, default. Now I do that and nothing happens. And that's because we're not in a view where we can see anything happening. We're in a view that's just a standard shaded view. If I go over to where it says perspective in my viewport, and I click that little arrow that's right next to it, I can actually change from our standard shaded into a rendered preview. And if I were to click on rendered, we get a preview of these in gold. Now, it doesn't always work nicely. And in this case, it really didn't work nicely. Everything's black. And even if I go to orbit around, I still might not see it correctly. That doesn't mean that the rendering won't turn out. And that's why I don't overly emphasize this preview mode. So I'm going to go back to shaded and not worry about it. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually render the scene to take a look at what it looks like. So I'll click on the little teapot shaped item here. And when I click on that, it's going to go ahead and try to render out what this looks like. It actually looks like it's a little bit light. And so that's a setting error on my part. Let me try. I'm going to go ahead and close this for a second. I didn't want to get into the settings. Let me try a different material and see if it shows up any better. Yeah, it's just too light. That's a mistake on my part. So let me show you how to fix that. I think we can just reset the defaults here. Perfect. So what I'm going to have you do in the V-Ray Asset Editor is I'm going to have you click on the gear icon right here for settings. Once you've clicked on that gear icon for settings, come all the way down to the bottom, and there's a little curling arrow. Click on that revert to default render settings. and we'll reset everything, and then we'll try the render again. And there we go, much better. So I apologize, that was something I should have fixed along the way. And that gives us a preview of what our little rendering looks like. As it builds out the rendering, you'll see that the quality will get better and better. Down here, it'll give us a progress bar, rendering image past 12. So it's going to go through a lot of different passes to kind of clean up the image and get rid of the noise as it goes forward. I'm going to go ahead and stop this rendering. For right now, I'll click on the little stop icon in the upper right. And then I'll come back to my materials, and maybe I'll change back to the gold. So I can right-click on gold and say apply to layer default. And then I could go back and I could render again. And my objects, it obviously didn't apply. Unless my objects were, let me double check something here. It's always great when stuff that you do doesn't end up working out. I think I have this applied to the objects themselves. So let me go ahead and apply to selection, and then we'll try to render it again. There we go. Now they're going to turn out gold. So that was where I was going with this, and that is that if you want one of the objects to be a different material, all you have to do is select one of the other objects. Oh, come on. Yes, I want to stop my rendering. I need to stop the rendering first. There we go. I could select this one object. I could right-click on the new material and say apply to selection instead of apply to layer. And then when I go back and do the rendering again, that material would change. There are other default materials that are built into V-Ray. If we wanted to access any of those, and I'll encourage you to play around with this, there's no reason not to. You only have to apply a basic material. But if you want to explore some of the materials, there is a little drawer. There's a tiny sideward-facing arrow right here that you can click on, and this will bring you into the V-Ray materials library. Stay away from glass. It's not going to turn out. You don't have enough scene for the glass to turn out. So glass and water, the liquids, don't bother yet. You're not ready. But any of the rest of them, you're more than welcome to pick. So some of them will look good, some of them won't. But you can go through and you can pick any variety of them. Let's see, here's fabric. They have different carpets. So I could pick like a carpet pattern. If I want to pick that, I'm going to click on it and drag it over into my materials list. And there it is. There's the carpet. I can right-click on it and say apply to selection. And then when I start rendering again, that one's then going to have the carpet applied to it. You guys get the idea. So you feel free to play around with it and pick different materials and kind of explore them. Some of them are going to look good. Some of them aren't going to look good. Brick, for example, is going to look a little weird if you put it on this object. That's okay, right? We'll get to how to make it look right, etc., as we go forward. When this is done doing its rendering, we need to go ahead and save this file. The good news about the new version of V-Ray is even if it hasn't finished rendering, you can always save at any point along the way. So while you're waiting for it to finish rendering, you could at least save something to have something to turn in. So I'm going to go ahead and save it right now, even though it's not quite done doing its rendering. And I'll do that by clicking this little disk icon. It's so funny, the floppy disk has become the universal save icon. But most of you probably weren't even alive when floppy disks were used. So it's kind of irrelevant at this point. This was actually a thing, like a physical thing that you had to put in the computer. It was like a flash drive, except it stored like maybe 1 megabyte. Maybe. Anyway, yes, I was in computers when that was a thing. Anyway, you'll click on that icon. It'll ask you where you want to save it. If you have a flash drive, you can save it to your flash drive. Otherwise, you can save it just onto the desktop today. You do not need to save this file long term. It's a one-off thing. We're doing it today, and that's it. You won't ever use it again. So you can save it on the desktop temporarily. I'm not overly worried about it. So when you go to save it, you have a couple different options. You can save it as a PNG, or you can save it as a JPEG. I think JPEG's a little bit easier. So I'll go ahead and choose JPEG. You'll give it a name. This is exercise 201, and I'll go ahead and click on save, and it will then save that image for me. From here, it's a matter of actually creating the post and posting it on the course website. Many of you are already very comfortable with this. If you have not done this before with me, this is where I'm going to show you how to make your post. Just watch me. Don't try to do it at the same time. You can do it afterward. When I go to make my post, I'm going to go back to the course website. Here I am. I should see a black bar that goes all the way across the top of the page. On that black bar, I should see a plus icon for new. If for some reason you're not seeing that, tell me, because it's probably something I set up in your account incorrectly, and I can fix it with just a little toggle switch. So I'm going to click on that new plus icon, and I'm going to come down here to post. That's going to create a brand new post for my work. There it is. And when I create this new post, the first thing that I can add is a title. So I would probably say exercise 201, and then maybe my name. It's always nice. And below that, in this content window right here, it works just kind of like Word. I could put any text that I wanted, etc. For our purposes today, there actually isn't any text that I need to put in there. So I don't need to worry about putting text in there. I do, however, have to upload my image and use my image. I'm going to use that as what's called a featured image. And you'll see at the top here there's this little red line with an error saying you need a featured image before you can publish your work, before you can turn in your work. I'm going to create that featured image, or I already have created it. I just need to upload it to the page. And I'll do that by coming over to the right side here and scrolling all the way to the very bottom of the page. At the very bottom of the page is the Set Featured Image link. It's right there. If I click on it, it'll take me to a page where I can upload my little image that I created. Now in this case, these are a bunch of images that I've uploaded in the past. I need to upload a brand new file. I'll click on the Upload Files tab right there. And I'll click on Select Files and go find that file. Alternatively, I could drag the file in. That would be fine as well. There it is. There's my exercise 201. I'll go ahead and say Open. It will take a minute. It will upload. It'll show it. There it is. Once I have it shown here, I can go ahead and click on Set Featured Image. And my image will show up right here as the featured image. Before I actually click Publish, I need to do one more thing. So I'll scroll up here and look under the Categories section right there. And I need to make sure that I categorize this as 136. This is an exercise, and it's exercise 201. So I'm checking those boxes. That will help make sure that this gets in the right spot from an organization standpoint. So it's Archi 136, exercises, and exercise 201. Don't mark it as assignment 201. It's not an assignment. It's just an exercise for today. So once I have those categories set up and I have my featured image, I can scroll back up to the top here and I can click on the Publish icon. So I'll go ahead and click on Publish. There it is. When it's published, I'll get a little notification that it's been published, and I can click on View Post. I can also click on View Post up here in the black bar that runs across the top. If I click on that, I will see a post with my image. There's no text associated with it because there's no text required to be associated with it. If I go to Student Work, I go to Digital Tools for Architects, I choose Exercises, and I choose Exercise 201. It's supposed to show, oh, some of you already posted your stuff. That's why it wasn't the first one. There it is. There's the one that I just posted. So yours will show up there as well. If you struggled a little bit with the post, don't panic. I'll come around. I'll help you. I'll make sure you get your post done today without a problem. Okay? So our goal today is to get a post, to do a little bit of Rhino work, and to get a rendering out of it. So there's our rendering. There isn't any reason why you shouldn't be able to get that rendering out today. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I think we have enough time for you to get there. It looks like we have about an hour left in class. I don't have an expectation that you're going to stay here the full time today. I think that's unreasonable. You haven't had enough classes to have work to work on just yet. So once you have this done and posted, you're free to leave for today. If you want to add the class still, I believe that I talked to both of you at the break. I want to make sure that you guys actually got in and everything worked out before you leave. So come by and just make sure that everything worked out. Other than that, you're free to go. Come back to class on Wednesday. Make sure you bring your flash drive or your hard drive on Wednesday, you will be saving your work and continuing. So we'll do some work, you'll save it, it'll be next class, you'll keep working on that same file. So it's really important that you bring your flash drive or hard drive to class on Wednesday. Okay? Are there any questions about anything? Nope, you guys are a quiet group. All right, I'll let you guys finish up, and then you can get on out of here.